welcome to Silver Threads, where we are still walking, still waking. I'm Carla.
And I'm Eleanor. And this is the show where we trace our present path through people and stories of the past, as we ourselves, long-term radicals, learn about each other, from each other, and continue to walk, continue to wake. This week, we are joined by Ifat Gazia, a 28-year-old Kashmiri Muslim filmmaker, journalist, and academic currently pursuing her PhD in communications at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. She previously has a degree in media from SOAS, University of London. She was born and raised in the most militarized place on earth, Kashmir. She grew up listening to stories of oppression, occupation, and resilience, and eventually became a storyteller, bringing the story of Kashmir to the world through her articles, research papers, films, and now podcast. Ifat's first documentary, Long Ago I Died, that she directed at the age of 19, was widely acclaimed in Kashmir and abroad. Her research work in Kashmir has been mostly related to human rights. She has co-authored the first comprehensive report on torture in Kashmir and has also contributed to the 2019 Project Censored book. She is a recipient of UMass Research Enhancement and Leadership Fellowship and also the Muslim Women in Media Fellowship in 2020. She is the founder and producer of the Kashmir Podcast, a bi-weekly educational podcast from Kashmir, bringing out the stories of grassroots resistance and resilience to the outside world. Her PhD research broadly looks at the intersection of technology and occupation. She can be reached on Twitter at Ifat Gazia. Thank you so much for joining us, Ifat.
Thank you so much for having me, Eleanor and Carla.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
So we like to start with a little look back, I guess, at the journey that that folks have been on, and I'm very curious to hear about yours in particular. When you felt on your journey that you really felt the need to act, you felt inspired to act, that you had a role to play in the change that you felt was necessary that you saw around you.
This is a very interesting question, but I don't have any specific answers because it was not a particular moment that I felt that I have to do something. I think this feeling has been with me ever since I have had my senses ever since I grew up. I realized that the place that I was living in, this is not the normal life that human beings should be living. And I always felt very bothered that the way Kashmiris were very much, interested in the rest of the world politics, what was going on in other parts of the world, especially human rights violations, and we would come out in support for people in other parts of the world do protest. The same thing was not happening for Kashmiris. But I think when I was 3 years old, I have written about it, spoken about it so many times. That was the first time I saw a military man slapping my father. I was in my father's lap, and of course, I didn't know what military meant. I didn't know what occupation meant, but I did understand that it was something abnormal. And of course, I was very scared. And from that day onwards, whenever I saw men in uniform, it kind of scared me. So that was really scary from that point on. But I grew up, and I think I was around 3 or 4 years old when my whole town was gutted down to fire, and the population of the town, all of us, we were living like refugees for months because people lost their houses, their belongings. Militants were hiding in the shrine, which was like hundreds of years old construction, but the shrine is like thousands of years old, the basic one. So it was like historically an important site, spiritually an important site. So people were devastated, not just they lost their homes, but also the very spot that they spiritually connected to. And I remember that fire. We were living on the outskirts of the town. I remember the burnt pages of the Holy Book Quran and other holy books which were in the library or in the mosque, which was just next to the shrine. They were flying, those black pages. I still remember that scene, all of us standing on top of a small hill and watching the town burning. So that was very traumatizing, but then somehow we were also very used to see all these things. It's not like suddenly something happened. I was born in 90s, and it was a time when it was it was so volatile in Kashmir. It was so uncertain. People would leave in the morning and they wouldn't know if they are coming back because they were tired of Indian occupation, and everybody wanted to revolt back or like have a plebiscite for Kashmir that has been promised to us in 1947 and never has happened. And in all of this, like India and Pakistan fighting with each other, Kashmiris have always been a casualty, whether it's their proxy war or whether it's people from Pakistan coming in to Kashmir and fighting with the Indian military or whatever is happening. It's the Kashmiris have always been the casualty. And it's not just other people taking interest. Kashmiris themselves are sick of Indian occupation and they have always wanted a plebiscite and to decide for themselves. And in recent years, we have had huge numbers of Kashmiri boys who are either studying medicine or engineering or like doing any other kind of education, really good scholars, joining militancy and reclaiming that, reclaiming our narrative that Kashmir wants freedom. We want freedom from occupation and from oppression, from all this violence. So in 90s, the kind of resistance, the kind of social movements that were going on were kind of different. But after 2008, it was different altogether. Like even youngsters became a part of it because of the introduction of internet in Kashmir. All these local rebels, they became poster boys of New Age militancy in Kashmir. They had fan pages and people followed them and liked their videos, and all of this has been happening. So to answer your question, I never had that one particular moment I thought that, oh, I have to do something about it. The sentiment has always been there. And for different people in my generation, it sort of manifests itself in a different way. For example, for me, it's writing about it, speaking about it. For someone, it's like, okay, I'm just going to pick up a gun because writing and speaking is not helping, or, we are done with it. And so many people express their emotion for freedom, their expression they express it in a different way. So it has been there all along, not a very particular moment.
Thank you so much for sharing some of that. That's, I can imagine that's not an easy thing to always talk about. I think it's neat that you talked about like that what you decided to do, and some people picked up the gun, and I see you picking up the camera and the pen, as a kind of a metaphoric weapon. I'm wondering through that work, you started young, your first film at 19. What have you learned about storytelling and amplifying folks from the front lines? And being there, and I think you used the term witness. I'm curious what you mean by that. Like, what have you learned along the way, and what was maybe some of the hard things you had to learn about telling people's stories?
Honestly, every day is hard. Telling every story is hard because I don't want to be this stakeholder that, okay, I'm the person and you should listen to the story of Kashmir from me. No way. You should listen to the story of Kashmir from every Kashmiri. And right now I'm in the US. I feel like I'm so privileged, and because I'm not living there, even though my parents, my brother, all my existence is in Kashmir. It's just I am studying here. It's not like I'm even a US citizen. But I still feel that I'm so privileged because I am not living through the everyday occupation, not physically experiencing it, but I feel like mentally I experience it way more than how people there might be experiencing it, because it's not just my own trauma. I add my family and my friends and all those things to it. I constantly worry about them. I constantly think about so many things that could go wrong. So I am a witness to not just the stories around me, but my stories as well. So I never want to take away from people and tell their stories. That's why I always tell my stories. And for example, the film that I made, I let the people tell their story themselves. The podcast I do, I let the people speak. And in fact, in one of the feedbacks that I got for the season 1 of the podcast is like, you suddenly abandon the audience and you don't speak at all, because I have somehow seen people speaking about it, saying that, we always have had other people speaking for us. Although I'm a Kashmiri and I can't speak for Kashmiris, but I still sort of think that, no, I am at a more privilege than somebody who is right now in Kashmir, and just let them speak and not take it away from them, kind of. Because one thing that I have personally struggled a lot with it, Kashmiris have always had researchers from India and other parts of the world writing about them. And it's not like Kashmiris have not been working and writing their histories and writing about their presence. There have always been Kashmiri researchers, ethnographers, journalists writing about it, but not that every time their work was reflected in the world outside. So one moment, like after August 5th, 2019, when our autonomy was revoked, things did suddenly change for me. Although I have always been doing this work, but at that point of time, I was like, this is enough. Like, it was like it just hit us so hard, like all Kashmiris, like our very identity was taken away from us. And I was like, this is it. I mean, we have to tell our story ourselves. Although this idea of podcast, Eleanor knows about it, it has been there for like years and years, but never really worked on it. But that at that point of time, I was like, this is it. I tell somebody, oh, this is happening in Kashmir, they're like, oh, where is it? So I have to go on explaining it's between India, Pakistan and China. I first have to give them a geography lesson, because people don't even know where this place is, forget about knowing what kinds of human rights violations people have to suffer. Although it's the most militarized land on earth, you can imagine, like, somebody had tweeted a few days back that there are more military men in Kashmir than dustbins. Like, she had to carry a rotten orange in her pocket for, like, I don't know, 5 to 10 kilometers, because she couldn't find a dustbin, but she saw so many military men. I mean, this is just an example. There is so much of militarization, and the militarization was inverse proportionally increased after August 5th, 2019, to completely silence the people. But I haven't been able to go home since August 5th, 2019. So even right now, if somebody had to tell the story of Kashmir, I would honestly pass the mic to someone who is in Kashmir right now than tell the story myself, even though I have my own personal experiences, my own stories. But yeah, I want to add something. Our voice has always been sort of manipulated, and we have always been misrepresented, in the world outside. So it's a very critical situation when you want to host a program on Kashmir, when you want to speak on Kashmir, on want to be our ally. You should really know. I mean, it's very critical that you know that which are the voices that you should be speaking to. Not everybody. I mean, I want a free Kashmir. Not everyone in Kashmir would want a free Kashmir. Someone would want to go with India, someone would want to go with Pakistan. And I'm not saying that I'm the only person whose opinion counts. Everyone's opinion counts. So, but one thing that's important is when we have these conversations, we try to bring the facts and tell the truth and acknowledge everything. Like, I cannot tell you are an international audience and I cannot tell you, no, all of us want freedom. No, that's not true. All of us want different things. But what's important is that we are never being given this chance to decide what do we want. It's like all theoretically, there is no plebiscite where people can decide. And what happens is Indians are everywhere. Like, Indian people are academics, they are journalists, they are at really good places. I'm not going to name a publication that I wrote for last year. And in the end, they wanted to change so many things in my article. And I was like, I'm going to withdraw it. Turns out one of their senior editors was Indian, who had problem with everything that I had written, which was nothing but the facts. And eventually, of course, they printed it because they thought it would be a way more controversy if I withdraw and make a scene of it on Twitter. But recently, I pitched another story to them, and they outrightly, in plain words, said that they were not going to do it, which told me that I was completely blacklisted there. So it is very hard for us to find that place for us in this international arena, get our story out there so that we can tell it, because there are people who have agendas, there are people who do not want Kashmiri voices. So it gets very tricky, when we try to get our voices out there.
Yeah, I think that's those are the really powerful and important points. And I think another thing that I remember you telling me about when you were first starting the podcast was that you wanted to, and I'm sitting here looking at the pillowcases you sent me that are still absolutely gorgeous and I love them. And you said that one of the things that you wanted to do was highlight the beautiful culture and the resiliency of Kashmir and not just have it be stories of oppression. So that people get to see, like, well, this is my people, this is my culture, and this is the beauty in it. Can you talk a little bit about like how you've used storytelling and how you feel that that's important to uplift those stories as well?
Kashmir is such a beautiful place, such a beautiful place in terms of like arts and crafts and culture. It's so rich, but it's because of the occupation. Honestly, everything else is ruined. We brush everything else under the carpet. We're like, okay, we have like our everyday life to deal with. We have our survival to deal with. So we do not want to talk about culture and all the beautiful things that we have in it. And which, of course, because of occupation has suffered so much over the years. I have seen films like Narnia and all these classics, and wherever you will see these kings sitting on their throne, and in the background, the curtains are Kashmiri curtains. Like they are rich, like the work, for example, on those pillows, the gribble work, it's so rich. And for example, you talk about Pashmina, you talk about Kashmir, all of that coming from Kashmir are beautiful jewels, rubies, and everything else. We don't talk about it. It just feels like this is this war zone, and all of these things are happening there, and everything else is just brushed under the carpet. We are not really able to amplify the other stories. We are not able to amplify our artisans, our craftsmen, and the amazing work they do. So that's something which is very painful. But like I said, we never get a chance to do that because we have our everyday survival to deal with. And like all our arts and crafts, how much they have suffered because of occupation. And over the years, Kashmir has had different rulers. We have like British, Sikhs, and all these people, how they have been stealing from us and from our resources, and taking it to their countries and then showcasing like our craft and our work. And then we never basically got a chance to say, okay, fine, there was an earthquake and now we need to fix our houses and fix our things and maybe we can start a normal life. It never happens. We get hit by one thing and we are still sort of trying to stand up, and we get hit by another thing. And in all of this, all our beautiful things and the beauty of Kashmir, it's even like rulers have called it the paradise on earth. It's so beautiful. But honestly, when I think about Kashmir, the beauty doesn't come in my eyes. I just think about the violence, the curfews, the killings, the blood, and everything. It's such a hard juxtaposition. Like here you are saying that this place is like heaven on earth, but then it's worse than hell for Kashmiris who live there. And all these Indians romanticizing Kashmir, Indian influencers going to Kashmir, and their Bollywood, their actors going and shooting pictures, they're making videos, and all of these, like wearing some kinds of costumes and calling it Kashmiri, which is not Kashmiri, is cultural appropriation, and doing all of that without acknowledging that Kashmir is not a normal place. They present it as, oh, Kashmir is heaven, it's safe, you should go, promoting that occupation, that settler colonialism, that occupational tourism in Kashmir without acknowledging what's really happening in Kashmir. That's something which boils my blood. There has been recently 3 young boys, like juveniles, were killed, and then the families were denied even the dead bodies, and they said, oh, they were militants, when they were not. They have no evidence to prove that. And now their bodies were not, which is a common thing, like Afzal Guru was hanged, Maqbool Butt was hanged, their bodies were never returned to their families so that they can bury them in Kashmir. Even the right to mourn properly, to the right to see the dead bodies and bury them, it's taken away from them. And now the families of these boys whose bodies were taken away and they were killed in a fake encounter, they are slapped with a terrorism charge for simply mourning the dead. So it's like every morning I first go to Twitter and I see what's happening in home. I don't want to. Like, I have honestly deleted all social media from my phone because I am completely emotionally bruised. Like, my phone scares me. Like, even one notification of email gives me anxiety. Like, I don't know what's coming next. But I still open my laptop and see Twitter first, what's happening. And all these news, there is so much of pain and so much of human rights violation. And then you see all these Indians promoting Kashmir as the same place. Come and do this and do that, and how, for example, they, like the Indian media and anyone who is not basically pro-Kashmir, they try to present it as either India's internal issue, which is it not, or it as a terrorism problem, which it is not. Kashmir is a problem. Kashmir is a human rights issue, and they try their best to mask it and show it as something else. We are not Kashmiri. For example, if Kashmiris used to go to India, I remember my cousins, when they studied in other parts of the India, their classmates would ask them, so do every Kashmiris have guns at home? I mean, really, I went to Walmart last year. First time I saw this place where they sold guns. I froze there. Like, I'm just looking at the guns and different kinds of prints and everything they had. I have never in my life seen it like that. And it did trigger me. I did not move. I was just standing there and looking at the guns. And the guy, he came, he's like, do you need any help? What's wrong with you? He suspected me because I was wearing hijab, and then I'm frozen in front of the gun counter. And I really had to move. I said, no, sorry, nothing. But nobody understands this. Like, you come with your guns in our home and kill us, maim us, do all kinds of things with us. And then you think we are terrorists. So, and then being international space, like coming out there and creating your own space and trying to tell your story. It's not easy. Like I said, people are everywhere who do not want our story to go out, who do not want to support our voices. So not only do we have to do extra work to get our voices out there, but also fight all these hurdles and see how can we collaborate with people like us who would want to take our stories and take our story to the rest of the world. It's not easy. I mean, we have to try and create spaces for different kinds of people to talk. In the first series of the podcast, honestly, I mean, it was just last week 4G internet was restored in Kashmir after 550 days. So most of the guests in my podcast, 85%, you can say, were the people who were on ground. All of them are Kashmiris, but 85% were the Kashmiris who were in Kashmir, and I had to interview them. And without internet, you cannot do it. So I basically would send them questions, and most of the times they would send me an audio clip of their answer. And then I would download all those audio clips, tag them. Okay, this is the question they are answering. This is the question they are answering. And the voice quality won't be good. Then improving the voice quality, converting the things, and then stitching it together. It was so much work. I couldn't even take anyone's help because it was not a normal like conversation one could edit. And there are hardly 3 episodes where I actually had the guests who had good internet and I could have a proper conversation with them. And those episodes look like a conversation. And I have these people, and mostly I have had so many supporters for the podcast. I'm so grateful for that. In just few months, there have been like thousands of downloads. People have received it very well. Of course, there are people who hate your work and all of that, but mostly it has been people who have received it well and supported it. But the problem is I couldn't take help in terms of editing because I was the person who was sending these questions. And then it was too much of work for anyone. Even if I would ask anyone to volunteer for me and put these things together, maybe they wouldn't be able to, do that. And then I would insert my question. So many people criticize, most of your podcasts, they don't look like a conversation. But I wish to tell them that, yes, it was not a conversation. I tried to make it look like a conversation. People back home I was interviewing, they didn't have internet. They had a 2G internet in which it took them like hours and hours to upload those voice clips, which I later on downloaded and made sense of it because I wanted to bring you the stories from Kashmir. It would have been way easier for me to just have Kashmiris in other parts of the world who had good internet and interview them. No, but I wanted to listen from the Kashmiris who were on the ground, no matter how much work it took. And I didn't do them a favor. I didn't do anyone a favor. I did myself a favor by bringing those stories because I want to uplift those voices. I want to bring those stories. But sometimes I really wish that people had the compassion and the eyes to see, like it's not any other part of the world. Things don't happen normally. We did not have internet. Like in 2019, I saw my parents after 7 months on a hazy 2G video call. I mean, think about it. It was so hard for me, like when the 2G internet was restored and they called me and, their faces are going all the places. And I literally rushed out of my class to receive their call. I, in fact, have a screenshot of that because it felt so unreal. In those months, I believed that maybe I'm never able to see my parents again. And for so many months, I couldn't even talk to them on a voice call. It was only after landlines were restored in our area. Then I had to call someone in Delhi, and then they would call my home and connect me on a conference because I couldn't even call them directly. So it was so much, So for example, now there are these people and I want their stories to come out, but then there is so much of struggle that goes behind it. But I'm not telling you that. I'm just telling you the story because I want you to listen to our story, And next time when you tell me, I don't know where Kashmir is, I don't know what's happening there, it should not be my problem educating you about all these issues because global justice should be everyone's worry. Like everybody should worry about it. It should not be just my worry because we cannot have peace in other parts, all the world, if there is not peace in all parts of the world. But I don't know why people don't understand it. I mean, I don't know why human rights activists are selective. I have been very critical about it, very angry, talking about like different types of activism and people, because, for example, they would, retweet or tweet about something that's bothering them or something they sort of associate with or something that looks like a sexy, classy moment to follow and not necessarily something from Kashmir. And over the recent years, there are so many Kashmiri organizations and people and friends who have been trying to now bring this issue and make it sexy and classy for the international influencers and others so that they would at least like to talk about it or share stuff about it, although it shouldn't have been like that. If you care about a certain issue, you cannot be selective about your human rights. And I'm an activist, but I only care about Palestine. I'm an activist and I only care about Kashmir. It shouldn't be like that. If I care about Kashmir, I have to care for the indigenous people in America. I have to care for the Black people in America. And I have to care for Palestinians and Syrians and everywhere, anywhere where any kind of injustice is going on. I cannot be selective because the root cause is oppression. The root cause is same. Like, I cannot be selective. Okay, that oppression is bad and this oppression is not bad. But unfortunately, I don't see people understanding this. So maybe that's why we are in so much of trouble.
You're listening to Silver Threads, part of the Grounded Futures multimedia platform. For more information and to donate to our totally ad-free show, check out groundedfutures.com. You can reach out to us with thoughts and suggestions at silverthreadshow@protonmail.com. You can find out more about our host Eleanor via artkillingapathy.com and our host Carla via joyfulthreadsproductions.com.
What's up, y'all? I'm Pearson, host of Coffee with Comrades. Coffee with Comrades is rooted in militant joy. Our hope is to cultivate a warm and inviting atmosphere, like walking into your favorite coffee shop to sit down with some of your close friends and share a heart-to-heart conversation. New episodes premiere every Tuesday, so be sure to smash that subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts so that you never miss an episode. We are proud to be a part of the Channel Zero Network.
And now, back to the show.
In another life, it goes back like 21 years, I studied peace and conflict studies with specializing in genocide. And of course, Kashmir was always part of like my network. And we didn't do the, cherry picking the cause. It was very much like that, but it's frustrating to see, like, fast forward 21 years and that's still there. And I think, I don't know. I feel even like I'll get in trouble saying this, but I think sometimes what it is that when a place gets more nuanced and more complex, that particularly white allies get freaked out about taking a position. Like you were speaking about being censored by some magazine, like that kind of, whose side am I going to be on kind of thing. Like they get too invested in the nitty gritty, which makes me think about, like, we ask our guests specifically to talk about geopolitical politics, about the ideas of militancy or radicalism and what that means to you at this time in your activism and your work. And maybe you could speak to that. I feel like you're talking about it all the way through this conversation, but maybe we could talk a little bit more specific about those ideas of what it means to be radical or militant in the context of your work.
So I was recently speaking to another Kashmiri, and she was telling me how they are like doing some events for like Kashmiris, like online events and stuff. And she said, my name came up, but they said, no, we have to drop it because she is too radical. And at that point of time, I couldn't understand whether I had to laugh or whether I should cry. But honestly, I'm very happy about it. People think that I have gone too much extreme in the other direction. Like for me, no, like there cannot be any kind of reconciliation with India. Like as long as they don't leave us, they don't take their military out, nothing is going to figure out. Maybe before 5th August 2019, I would have thought about things a bit differently. Maybe I wouldn't have been radical, although I was always pro-Kashmiri independence. But yes, like they assault you again and again, and it did turn me into something else. I do think that I am a radical right now. And for example, like I said, I went to a new university and realized that there was just me and one undergrad Kashmiri student, not many Kashmiris, but there were many allies from so many different countries. Like whenever I would do a Kashmir event, they would come, but they were also they were even Indian friends who are a part of the Kashmir solidarity group that is there, which I appreciate so much. But there are always like different people. There were other people, for example, who tried to uplift the Kashmir issue, but in their own way. Like they wanted to talk on my behalf, which sort of makes me uncomfortable. And it's not just for Indians. It's even in any Pakistani or any Bangladeshi or anyone who would say, okay, fine, you sit down, let me talk for you. So that's something which doesn't make me comfortable. And that's something that makes me come across as a radical as well. I believe in Kashmir's complete independence from India. Kashmir should be free. But like I said before, uh, different people want different things. Maybe I come across as a radical for saying this, but this is who I am. And I think my Muslim identity is very important for me of who I am and what I have become. So maybe that's another thing that adds to this radicalness that I am. So my Kashmiri Muslim identity is something that has made me who I am, that makes me do things that I want, especially because religion is used as a tool against us. In India, they use Islam, our religion, as a tool against not just Indian Muslims, but also against Kashmiris, making terrorism a problem of Islam, which is not true. Terrorists don't have a religion. They can have any religion. It's not like they have this. So it's that I have to own all these narratives. Yes, I am a Muslim and I'm not a terrorist. Yes, I am a Muslim Kashmiri. And I believe in Kashmir's complete independence from India. And I want all our human rights to be restored. So I think this is maybe too much. And based on the geopolitical situation that Kashmir is in, it does make you come across as a radical just for wanting the things that really belong to you. And you're not really wanting something like bring the moon to earth kind of a thing.
It's frustrating that dignity is seen as a radical need.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of the speech that I believe Winona LaDuke gave to the UN, and she said, "I want my people to be safe, and I want fresh water to drink, and I want clean air, and I'm radical." And yeah, and so I'm a radical too. So
yeah,
I think that's and I also think that it's interesting that you mentioned that like that things have changed you. And I think in particular, like because you now exist in like you are in the United States now, but like you said, like you are always in Kashmir, like that's always within you. I'm also curious like about how your journey is evolving, particularly with you living in kind of both spaces at the same time. Like how do you feel like your storytelling and your work is evolving?
I have like a million stories and things going on in my mind all the time. And I want to tell all of these stories. And I'm like, okay, I make notes on my board all the time. I have to write about this. I have to write about that. And over the years, like, especially right now, I look back and I feel like, wow, like all my experience and everything, it's so important. Like I read, for example, these books and it's like, yes, it's someone wrote a novel and it's their experience. They wrote a fiction or a nonfiction or whatever. But then when I look at my life, I'm like, there is so much that needs to go out and it will help people understand. And so many people will find comfort in it and they will relate to it. So in that way, I feel like I'm evolving. I feel like there is so much need for this storytelling and for these stories to go out. But then I also feel overworked and scared and overwhelmed all the time. This uncertainty, uh, that I hope I can go back to Kashmir soon. I am able to visit my family and come back to US safely. I hope my family is safe. I hope everyone in Kashmir is safe. Like I sit in the namaz, like when I have to pray, I never ever say or just pray for my family, because the entire people of Kashmir is my family. Unless everyone in Kashmir is safe, nobody is going to be safe. It doesn't matter. So all of those things, like continuously evolving and thinking that this is so important that we can't delay our storytelling, this process, we can't delay it anymore. But then also feeling so threatened and attacked. For example, on Twitter, I have these right-wing people who threaten me all the time. Like they send tweets and I report those tweets to Twitter. Hey, Twitter, like they are threatening me openly for so many things, like it's ruining my peace of mind and everything. And Twitter sends me back an email, oh, they found nothing wrong with the emails, they are not doing anything wrong. In the contrary, I get emails from Twitter that law enforcement agencies in India have flagged my account and they are going to take action against my account. So this is the kind of the world we live in. So where do we find the balance? Like I do not want to be on social media. It's making me crazy. I'm in fact taking a course this semester about fixing social media. Sounds very weird, but honestly, I mean, I am really struggling to find that balance. I don't want to be on social media, but that's the only place where I actually connect people I can connect with people like you and tell the people like what's happening. Like, where do I find that balance between the storytelling, which is a necessity, but then also protecting my own mental space? But that doesn't happen a lot. Although one thing about evolving is I want that thing to happen. If I have to last for many years and do the work that I do, then I have to take care of my health, my mental health as well. But it hasn't happened so far, and so many people think that once you're out of Kashmir or once you're in the US, your life is suddenly rosy, everything is hunky-dory, but that's not true. I feel responsible, although I shouldn't be. Like, I'm like, why can't I feel like a normal 28-year-old girl who is worried about her manicure and other things in life and, shopping, and those things don't come to me. Everything has Kashmir before this. Like, even on Instagram, I like to take pictures, and I like nature. They're just natural pictures. But somebody recently messaged me, oh, it was a photo of my cycle, my bike, and said, oh, well, people must be thinking you're so insensitive. You are having like a great life in US and we are suffering here. I'm like, this is just a cycle. And like how I have to be conscious all the time. And it's not like I just suddenly reached here. So much of work that goes into applying to grad schools and getting through the application process and trying my best to help other grad students to come out and study here, so that everybody can have a chance to come out and study here and do all of these things. But then there are always people who sort of try to demean your struggles and everything that you do, try to pull you down, especially because you're a woman. The kind of misogynist comments they make or the links they make with you. For example, I have never spoken about this, but my uncle, he was a part of the political party in Kashmir, and all political parties are, of course, Kashmir is run by India, right? We are not independent yet. So even all the government offices, people have government jobs, but they are technically working for India. So my uncle was in the politics. And when I started this podcast on Reddit, I found these comments. People saying, oh, who the hell is she to do this podcast? Her uncle is this person and he was in politics. So what? What if even my father was in politics? I have chosen to do this. And what if even I was in politics 5 years back, but right now I am a different person. I evolved into a different person. And this is the type of the work I want to do. And you can't bring all those past lineages and, push them on my face and say that, oh, well, you cannot do this just because you have done something else. So honestly, it's not easy. Like, storytelling is not a privilege for me. It's not easy. Like, every day I have to have these new fights and fight these discouragements. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to take care of myself. But then it doesn't happen. Once my husband told me, just try to take Kashmir out of your mind and see what you can do. Like, you're a graduate student, maybe you can do work on something else, but it doesn't happen. It was so easy for him to say that, but I cannot take Kashmir out of me. And by that, I'm not saying that, oh, I'm more Kashmiri than anyone else. Everybody has maybe way more than love than me. But I would not want anyone to tell me that you're a less Kashmiri because you are living outside. And I would not appreciate the same thing like me telling this to someone. I am a Kashmiri and it makes me no less Kashmiri that I'm outside of Kashmir. In fact, I am trying my best through my work so that everybody knows, people know what's happening in Kashmir and what's going on. So you do not really appreciate it when people try to discredit you from the work that you do, because I'm not doing it for those people. I'm doing it for Kashmir. I'm doing it for God. So, but all these people coming after you and trying to discredit you in so many ways, it is extremely discouraging. But then finding that balance that, okay, I have to keep that separate and I have to focus on what I want to do. So yeah, I think I have definitely evolved in that way.
Yeah, I mean, so much of what you talk about is familiar to me, and I'm going to embarrass Carla by bringing up her book that she co-wrote called Joyful Militancy, which is brilliant. And in the book, her and the other author talk about something which is rigid radicalism, which is basically like this idea that your work has to look this way and it has to pass these purity tests. And if it doesn't, then you're not radical enough. You're not, militant enough or whatever. And so that sounds very familiar because this is something, I get shit sometimes too. Like, somebody messaged me over the holidays because I had posted a picture of me smiling in front of a Christmas tree. And they were like, oh, it looks like you're having fun. Must be nice. Like when so many people are suffering. And I was like, yeah, because me not posting that picture would automatically mean they're not suffering, right? I guess, yeah, yes, of course. And the other side of that is like, I think it's necessary to put things out in the world that like, hey, this is how everyone should be able to have access to this kind of joy. And we need to share this kind of joy. And when I put that out there, I'm not saying, oh, look at me, aren't I special? I'm sending out joy, and I'm sending out, in that case, I was sending out like, Merry solstice and and I love you guys. And this is a beautiful time of year. And so like that is a part of that, and it doesn't help. And this is something that we've also talked with guests in the past, is like this need to always focus on trauma, this need to always focus on the bad. It completely erases what we're fighting for as opposed to what we're fighting against. And like when you talk about you want to free Kashmir, it's like, well, that's something to fight for, and that is a beautiful thing. But if we never mention that, then we're only ever talking about the bad, and we're only ever focusing on the bad, and we're suggesting that the only way to live is to live a traumatized existence, which is of course not what we're building towards and not what we're hoping for.
Exactly. I mean, every one of us deserves to be happy, right?
So with that, I'm also curious, like, about this. You're at school in the U.S. and the pandemic has made life difficult all over the world. But I'm also curious how it's shifted the way that you do what you do, and or if it has.
COVID disrupted plans of everybody in the world. So it's not like anyone is an exception in that. But for example, last year when the COVID was happening and I'm an international student here on a student visa, and then suddenly ICE decided, okay, we need to send all the international students back. They cannot stay in the US if they don't have in-person classes. I literally freaked out. I mean, I wrote on Twitter and I was like, ICE cannot send me back because we don't have internet in Kashmir. It meant that I had to say goodbye to my degree and say that, okay, this is not happening. I have to go back because we don't have internet. I can't do online classes. I can't stay enrolled, and I would have to say goodbye to my degree. But then luckily universities were able to fight back with ICE and get a stay or something on that order, and we could stay in the country. So it did add so much of uncertainty to our lives here, especially international students, making it hard to decide, like, what are we going to do? What if we leave, go visit family, and then CDC guidelines or whatever make it impossible for us to get back in the country? So for international students, yes, it did come up with its own challenges. And for example, I had been going to UMass only for one semester in person, and then this is the third semester online, and it's not really a great learning process. It feels like I'm doing a distance degree kind of a thing. And when you are in grad school, you actually want to be on campus, meet people, have conversations, and you bump into your colleagues in the common office that you have, and you talk about your research, you talk about so many things, and so many opportunities come up. All of that has completely stopped. I haven't seen my classmates since March last year. So by every day, it's just getting harder and harder to make sense of things, to keep going, because it is very, like, not comfortable. Like, I have the classes I take are 3 hour long. Staying in front of the Zoom for 3 hours for one class, it's a lot of fatigue. And then trying to do everything online. For example, the course I teach is in film production. So I have been actually teaching on campus in the fall semester, and I was supposed to teach on campus this semester. I mean, this is the only course our department is offering in person, because you can't teach filmmaking online. Kids have to know how to edit. They have to use the cameras. They have to get the footage. And now suddenly our campus, even before the class started, it went from high risk to elevated risk to high risk. And they had to shut down all face-to-face classes. And now struggling because I never got any training, like how you have to teach online, especially these classes. And now I have to struggle and figure out myself, okay, what am I going to do in a 3-hour production class, but online? And you're teaching to undergrads. Some of them have no idea about this class. It's like you have to teach them from the basics, like what is editing, what is Adobe Premiere Pro, what is storyboarding, how do you write scripts. Those things don't happen online. But then I also don't have any training, but then I also have to figure out it at my own. So overall, I feel like ever since August 5th, 2019, I was in Kashmir that time when our autonomy was taken away. Kashmir was already so militarized, and then things went down from there. They got worse. And then the conditions I reached to US with, and all the time in the plane, like it's like almost a 20-hour journey from start to end. And I was crying on the plane, and I was like, oh God, I hope I can speak to my parents, and I wish somehow I could tell them that I have landed safely. And that didn't happen for months until their landline was restored. And after months after that, I saw them on a 2G call. And then the pandemic hit. It's like I was giving you the example, it's like earthquake came, I try to get up, then a tsunami is coming. It's like continuously getting hit by so many things. And then last year when I started the podcast, Eleanor, I was scared. I was scared to death. So many of my friends that don't do this, things are so bad in Kashmir. It's a time which is like where there is a complete censorship on media in Kashmir. Journalists and activists are being hounded. They are put in jails for doing the work. And at that point of time, your stories are way more important than they were before. You have to speak up. But then it's also extremely critical, puts you in so much of risk. But you still do it because you are not doing it if you are not doing a favor on anyone. You still go ahead and do that work. But it's so hard. Like with every episode, like I will be continuously thinking, oh my God, people are downloading it and listening. They're going to say this thing is wrong and that thing is wrong. All the time nervous and thinking about stuff. And it's just too much. I all the time have like this tab open on my browser, like looking for tickets, New York to New Delhi, because we always have to first fly to India. And from there we can take a flight. I don't know. It's like sort of trying to heal my wounded heart because I really, really want to go home. I feel that's one of the reasons I feel so exhausted and overwhelmed, because I have never been outside of Kashmir for more than 8 months. Never. And this is for the first time. It's almost 2 years now that I have not been able to go back. So, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I like when we have silence after such a beautiful statement. I just sort of wanted to acknowledge that. I'm so sorry. I send as much solidarity and love I can to you. Our next question, we try to connect this time of COVID and ongoing. You've shared with us your ongoing struggles and disasters of Kashmir, and then how COVID's intensified everything, and in terms of looking forward and imagining maybe things getting better. I'm curious where hope is in your day-to-day life and if it's there.
I mean, hope is everything that we got. Hope is that has kept us alive. And I still hope, inshallah, that there is end to all kinds of fascism and oppression. And this will end. This fascism and this oppression and occupation will end. Kashmir will be free. I definitely believe that. But then I also want all of us, all Kashmiris, to be prepared for that moment so that we don't feel directionless. So that at that point, we are prepared to take the command and know that how we are going to build our nation, because we will have to do it from scratch. Everything is being stolen from us. Our resources, you should see what kind of ecocide India is doing in Kashmir, chopping down our forests, taking out our minerals, our resources and everything. So maybe even if when they leave, we will be left with hardly anything. So we do have to, start everything from scratch. But then the hope that we will be free and we will be able to build a nation, and this hope that everything and everybody will be fine. I think, hope is an important thing, and the only thing kind of that keeps me going.
Beautifully put. I wanted to also, because I know that you're obviously engaged with art, both creating it and inspired by it. So we like to ask folks if there's a film or a book or a song or something like that has inspired you in your work, and that you'd like to recommend.
Honestly, I mean, Kashmir in itself inspires me. The kind of people, saints, poets, personalities that have come out of Kashmir in itself is so inspiring. And even the generation in Kashmir right now, so many are like artists and they draw, some write poems, some people sing, and they are like hip hop artists. and their songs are amazing and they do great work. For example, MC Cash, Ahmer is another person, and his music is amazing. And I'm really inspired, by the songs they write, by the songs they sing. And there are so many cartoonists, Malik Sajjad, Mir Suhail Naqshbandi, who create amazing political art. They are political cartoonists. So, and there are so many Kashmiri authors, Mirza Waheed, Athar Zia, so many upcoming artists and authors and academics who are doing amazing work and writing and resisting in their own ways. And in general, like, it's just a few names, but so many Kashmiris inspire me. The entire Kashmir inspires me, even if it's the person like sitting by the window and it's this mother waiting by the window, that when their son or their daughter is going to come back in the evening, or the very Kashmiri woman, just like my mother, who wakes up before everyone else, cleans and cooks and makes sure breakfast is ready for everyone, then burns the kangris, like the winter fire pot that everybody uses, makes sure everybody is warm, makes sure everybody is fed. That inspires me. And I do try to address those things and write about those things, even in my research, like things that we don't usually talk about, like the kitchen garden my mom always has in the backyard of our house in summers, and for all other Kashmiri mothers, and how your children come from school and you quickly grab some tomatoes, grab some chilies, make some salsa types, Kashmiri salsa types together and feed them with rice. So all of those hardworking mothers, or the Kashmiri mothers who have lost their sons, their children, these mothers, those fathers, they are my inspiration. That's what keeps me going. And if in any way I can ever help to bring their story to the world, have them tell their story, if in any way I can be the bridge between them and the world, that's what gives me hope, and that's what inspires me.
That's so beautiful. Oh my gosh. Just thinking about those mothers sitting by the window. In terms of, it's kind of connected to recommendations, but it's also about your own story. Are there journalists or writers outside of yourself who you'd recommend, like, because you said it's just so divisive and because of censorship, and maybe people who you learned from inspired you, but even today, like, who we could be amplifying more to get the story out more?
So there are a lot of Kashmiri journalists who do great work, but like I said, Kashmiri journalists are being hounded. But for example, there are some new Kashmiri magazines who try to write the stories from the ground, and I love to follow their work. For example, Inverse Journal, for example, Mountain Ink magazine, for example, Vande magazine. I love the work they do. And then if you see Stand with Kashmir, the organization that I am also a volunteer of, it's a Kashmiri Global Diaspora grassroots organization. They have a page on Twitter and on Instagram and on Facebook. They promote these local journalists. They share their work all the time. So if you want to get news from Kashmir and what's happening there daily basis, you can follow these magazines. You can follow Stand with Kashmir. You can follow Kashmiri journalists. There are so many of them. There are groups on Twitter for Kashmiri journalists, like if you look it up, and there are so many people. And like I said, these new magazines who even don't have honestly proper resource to keep going. For example, there is this news organization called Free Press. They do reporting, reportage. They're on social media. You can follow their work. And these people really don't have resources. They don't have government ads. They just run from small donations and try to sustain there. But I'm really inspired by the work, the kind of reportage they bring to the outside world. So yeah, you can start with Free Press Kashmir, Mountain Ink, Mag, Inverse Journal, and Stand with Kashmir.
Cool. So yeah, that's kind of the other one of the last questions is what we're also trying to do is create a space where listeners can donate to something that our guest would like funds to go to. So one or two places that you would like to direct folks if they have some donations to give?
Mm-hmm. I think all of these organizations that I mentioned have pages set up where people can donate. I for sure know Free Press Kashmir has, Mountaineering Magazine has, Stand with Kashmir has, where people can go and donate. I'm not sure about the Inverse Journal, but people can check their website and find out. So they can donate to all these places wherever they like. And I wish I knew of more places, but it just gets very tricky when you are from a place like Kashmir, and even if you need donations, you want them, but then there will be so many obstructions in getting them, like how to take them. So I don't know. I personally don't have any kind of system set up for my podcast. I have not even applied for any grants. I'm just still in the phase where I'm doing the work and just moving forward. But yeah, you can totally, please, if you can, go donate to Mountaineering Mag, Stand with Kashmir, Free Press Kashmir, and do a little bit of research and see what channels does Stand with Kashmir or even Inverse Journal or Free Press Kashmir, what kind of organizations they follow, if they have links to set up where people can donate and help the local journalism in Kashmir. That would be great.
Thank you. That we'll put a link up with when we put the show out, and also a link to your podcasts.
Thank you.
People should support that as well. I think you might have answered this, but just in case, we also, part of that kind of mutual aid or mutuality is about asking our guests to amplify and take a moment to talk about maybe a younger an emerging journalist or writer or artist or filmmaker that inspires you and you'd like to tell the audience about.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's very precarious. I don't want to name one particular journalist or something and get them into trouble. Like I said, it's a lot of surveillance and everything, and then people be like, why did she name this one person and not the other person? But honestly, like I said, go to internet, do your research, check organizations like Stand with Kashmir. What kind of people do they follow? What kind of news are they trying to get out of Kashmir? I do personally trust their sources and the news they try to bring out. So they usually do a good job with like promoting local journalism, local journalists, and the news coming out of Kashmir. So it would be a good place to start with.
Great. We will include those links. And is there anything that, we covered a lot, and it's always beautiful and powerful to speak with you. Is there anything that you'd like to add that we maybe didn't ask or get to?
I think we almost covered everything. Honestly, the conversation of Kashmir can never end, but I just want to say that I'm very conscious about this thing, that I don't want to come across this singular voice coming out of Kashmir, because all Kashmiris are extremely resilient and brave and they can speak. All of them can. So I'm in no way trying to represent everybody, but just myself and how I see things. So I am in no way trying to represent the entire Kashmir or the entire Kashmiri sentiment or something. It is just how I see things and how I would like to address them and talk about them. But in no way I'm the only person. In fact, you should try and reach out. I can help you connect with other people. And, I know that so many Kashmiris want to talk, but like I said, there is so much of surveillance and censorship that they just have to shut themselves off. For example, I did an episode about the journalism in Kashmir. I had 5 journalists I spoke to, because not even one journalist could do the whole thing. They didn't want their voices to be identified and everything. And I had 2 female journalists who just gave me quotes and I had to read them because they didn't even want their voice to go out. None of them used their names. So it's very critical situation. So like I said, I can't name a journalist, even if it's for like I am sort of giving a shout out to them, but I would not want them to land in trouble because of that, So all those things. Like I said, one needs to do research and make sure that they get their news from credible sources. And if there is an Indian, Pakistani, and a Kashmiri in a room, please make sure you hear from a Kashmiri. And even if the other 2 are academics and the one you're listening to is not even a graduate student, nothing, just a Kashmiri, but still listen from them about what's happening in Kashmir. Pass the mic, basically.
Hear, hear. Yeah. Thank you. And I just wanted to say you for sure come across that you're not speaking for everybody, or it's embodied in how you speak and how you tell
Thank you so
stories.
much.
I know you're up against white, you're living in America where individualism is so toxic. So, but it doesn't come across that way. And I really want to reflect back to you that it really comes across that what you're saying. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Silver Threads is recorded in different places across borders. Carla is located in Canada on Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh lands. Eleanor is located here and there, usually either in Sweden or on Piscataway land, now known as Washington, D.C. And our guests join us from around the world. You can find out more about the show and our guests at groundedfutures.com. To learn more about Eleanor's work, visit artkillingapathy.com and follow her on Twitter and Instagram at RadicalEleanor. For Carla, follow her on Twitter and Instagram at JoyfulCarla. You can also reach out to us at silverthreadsshow@protonmail.com. And lastly, if you want to support the making of the show, you can donate over at groundedfutures.com. Thank you to the Grounded Futures team for supporting us with promotion. All of the snazzy graphics that you see are created by Jamie Lee Gonzalez. Grounded Futures is a multimedia platform and is produced by Carla Bergman, Jamie Lee Gonzalez, and Melissa Roach. Post-production audio for our show is done by Eleanor Goldfield. The intro and outro music for our show is a song called Floodlight by Eleanor's former band, Rooftop Revolutionaries. Thanks for listening, and now let's go rattle thrones and topple empires.
If it pays, then let it rest. It's time to wake up.